Hello everyone and welcome back. In today's video we've got a couple of things to discuss, including a few signings, a small trade, some buyouts with the Arizona Coyotes, and some more trade rumors involving Arizona, Buffalo, and Winnipeg. And we'll get to all that coming up right now. Hello everyone and welcome back to another video here at the End-to-End Hockey channel. Now in today's video we're going to be discussing a few things, and as usual we'll get to the signings first. So there have been definitely a few signings, and these are signings as of June 19th, so 3 days ago. There have definitely been a few signings over the past little while, so we'll get to the two entry-level contracts first. I'll start with the Ottawa Senators. Right winger Oscar Peterson, who was a third-round pick back in 2022, last year's draft, has signed a 3-year entry-level contract that will have an average annual value of $865,000, and he'll begin at the start of next year. Now for Peterson, last year was his draft year. He did solid. He was playing mostly in the junior SHL league. He put up some solid point totals, putting up 25 goals and 36 points in 46 games, which was a solid point total for Peterson. This past year, he was playing in the regular SHL. Once again, did pretty solid, putting up a goal and 2 points in 29 games, so he definitely did really well. Peterson looks like he could be eventually a good middle six winger. Probably still going to need some more time developing. I don't think he's NHL ready yet, but he looks like he can definitely be a good, speedy, playmaking winger at the NHL level. So probably still going to need a couple of years, maybe one more year in the SHL, and then 1 or 2 more years in the minors. So probably going to need 2 to 3 more years left in developing, but still, besides the point, after his development's over, I do think he could definitely be a solid NHL forward. So I think it was a really good pick in the third round for Ottawa, last year's draft, and I think Peterson long-term could definitely be a fit in their top 6. As for the other signing, it was another 2022 draft selection, as the Winnipeg Jets have signed Fabian Wagner, who was a 2022 6th-round pick from the Winnipeg Jets in this past year's draft, to his entry-level contract. If he's got a 3-year entry-level contract as well, with the average annual value of $858,000, and the deal begins at the start of next year. Now for Wagner, he's also been playing over in the SHL. He had no points in 8 games 2 years ago in his draft year. Last year he got into 22 games, but still didn't have a point, but still played pretty solidly for a good center in the SHL. So probably, once again, just like Peterson, going to need a couple of years to develop. He's still a solid player. I think in time could definitely be like a third-line center for the Winnipeg Jets. So definitely, I think it was a really good pick in the 6th round for the Winnipeg Jets. But still, probably going to need 1 year more in the SHL and then 1 or 2 more years in the minors. But still, in time, I think Wagner, just like Peterson, could be a solid like third-line forward for the Jets. And with the Jets possibly moving on from a couple of big centers this offseason, having a good center depth in the prospect pool is really going to be big for them. So having Fabian Wagner now on his entry-level contract is going to be good for them. So good to see Wagner get his entry-level contract from the Jets, and hopefully eventually he can be a good third-line center. And good to see Peterson get his entry-level contract from the Senators, and hopefully eventually he can be a good right winger on that middle six for the Senators. So definitely, like, it's 2 entry-level contract signings from the Sens and the Jets from former 2022 draft selections. Next, we go over to some of the signings that are more depth additions. Some of these guys could make the NHL next year, but wouldn't be surprised if most of these guys got into more AHL action. So we'll start off with the Tampa Bay Lightning, as they have signed forward Cole Kopech to a 1-year entry-level contract that will have average annual value of $735,000, and the deal will be at the start of next year. Now, Kopech was an RFA this year. He was a solid player. He's a winger. He can play either side of the ice. He's been mostly an AHL forward over the past couple of years, as he had 20 goals and 39 points in 69 AHL games a couple of years back. This past year, he had 7 goals and 19 points in 52 AHL games, but that was after already being called up to the NHL for a couple games, and having a goal in 17 of those. So definitely, I think he can eventually be a solid bottom 6 forward. I could even see him be a bottom 6 forward this year. Like you said, we started out last year, and the Bolts may have a little bit of a weaker team if they have to move on for some players this offseason. So if they need to bring up some younger players on cheap contracts, I think Kopech would be a prime opportunity for a call-up. Kopech, like I said, 1 year league minimum deal, not too shabby of a contract, and he did get into his first games of NHL action this past year. So I think in time he could definitely be like a good third line winger, and I think as early as this year he could definitely be a good bottom six forward, especially with the Bolts possibly moving on for some people. So definitely I think Kopech's going to be a really good addition to the Bolts, and it's a good thing that the Bolts were able to get him to resign. With the Dallas Stars, they signed goaltender Matt Murray to a 1-year, $775,000 deal that will begin at the start of next year. Now, for Murray, he's not the Matt Murray from Toronto. This is a different Matt Murray. Murray's been doing pretty well. He played his first full pro season last year. 2 years ago, he did really good over in college, signed with the Stars, was able to finish up the season in the AHL, and did pretty well, putting up a 1.68 goals against average and a 947 save percentage in 6 games. Then this year, which was his first full season at the pro level, he was mostly an AHL goaltender. He put up 2.37 goals against average and a 911 save percentage in 34 games, and also had a 3.39 goals against average and an 844 save percentage in 3 NHL games. So definitely, he got into his first NHL action. He looked really good, mostly in the AHL though. I think it could still develop for the next year or two. I think eventually maybe Matt Murray could be a solid NHL backup, but for now he's probably still a solid third stringer in Dallas. So definitely, I like the signing, gives them some more depth and goal. But for now, I don't think Murray will be much more than a third-string goaltender. So a good signing, but mostly just a good depth addition for the Stars. Then with the New York Rangers, they signed defenseman Zach Jones to a 2-year contract extension that will have an average annual value of $813,000, and the deal will begin at the start of next year. Now for Jones, he's a left-shot defenseman. He's been splitting time between the NHL and AHL over the past couple of years. 2 years ago, he had 9 goals and 35 points in 52 AHL games. Also had 2 assists in 12 NHL games. This past year, he had a goal, his first career NHL goal, and 2 points in 16 NHL games. Well, he had 8 goals and 31 points in 54 AHL games. Now, he was brought in last year to be the third pair partner for Braden Schneider. He didn't really work in that role, so he was sent back to the minors. I do wonder if they try moving him into that role again this year. Maybe with one more year of experience, he can do really good there. I think Jones has a future being a solid third pair defenseman, but it also wouldn't surprise me if the Rangers kept him as like a 7th defenseman or kept him in the AHL this year. So I definitely really wonder what's going to happen with Jones this year, whether he'll be an AHL or NHL forward. But definitely, I think he's one of the Rangers' better defensive prospects, and I definitely think there's a shot that he can make the NHL roster as like the third pair defenseman. So I definitely think Jones has a solid shot at making the NHL roster, and I think it's a really good job for the Rangers to sign him. And as for the Boston Bruins, they signed goaltender Brandon Bussi, who has signed a 1-year, $775,000 deal that begins at the start of next year. Now for Bussi, just like Matt Murray, recently signed with the NHL level. He played mostly in college 2 years ago until he signed with the Bruins and finished up the season in the AHL, putting up a 920 save percentage and a 2.54 goals against average in 5 AHL games. This past year, he was a solid NHL starter. He put up a 922 save percentage and a 2.50 goals against average in 52 games. So he was a solid AHL goaltender this past year. I think re-signing him gives the Bruins some more depth. Now, I think eventually Bussi could definitely be like a backup, maybe 1B goalie at the NHL level. Not sure if he's that level at this point in time, but he's a solid NHL goalie prospect. And I think in time, maybe he can be a good NHL goalie. The Bruins still have guys like Ullmark and Swayman at the NHL level. There's the possibility one of those two could be traded. So maybe Bussi becomes the good third stringer behind a cheaper backup for the Bruins, and eventually can be the full-time backup at some point in the foreseeable future. But for now, I think he's more of an AHL starter. So I probably still think he's a third-string goalie at this point in time. But I think this is a really good sign for the Bruins to sign a solid goalie prospect. And in time, I would not be too surprised if Bussi was a good, solid backup for the Bruins. So definitely another good sign there. And those are the 4 solid depth signings. Kopech in Tampa, I think, could get a shot this year at being a solid bomb six forward. Murray, I think, should be a solid third stringer for the Stars. Jones should at least get a shot, a third pair for the Rangers. And Bussi, well, he's most likely a third stringer for this year. I think in time could definitely be a good backup 1B goalie. So definitely some really good signings there, those 4 teams. And then lastly, with the one major signing that happened over those past few days, and that is that forward Jesper Bratt with the New Jersey Devils signed a long-term extension. signing an 8-year deal that'll have an average value of $7.88 million, and the deal will begin at the start of next year. Now, once again, Bratt was an RFA with arbitration rights, so getting a long-term extension with him was a huge, important deal for the Devils. Last year, they had to take a 1-year deal, which wasn't ideal for either side. So I think it's a really good thing that Brad was able to sign long-term with the Devils. He's definitely been showing his productiveness over the past couple of years. Back-to-back 73-point seasons, as he had 26 goals and 73 points in 76 games a couple of years ago before he signed his 1-year deal this past year. And then this past year, 32 goals and 73 points in 82 games. So definitely, he's definitely hovering close to the point per game mark. He's a solid point-producing forward, playing with guys like Hughes or Hischier, and he makes a lot of the players on that Devils team better. So signing him to a long-term deal was a really good move for the Devils. They also got him at a $7.88 million cap hit, which comes in at under Jack Hughes' $8 million cap hit, which is, I think, really important for the Devils. So definitely, I think this is a really good signing. They got him under $8 million. They got him on a long-term deal. There was a lot of talk that Bratt could be a trade chip for the Devils if they couldn't come to terms on like a long-term deal. So coming to terms on a long-term deal was a great job for both the Devils and Bratt. Bratt's going to remain as a mainstay on the top six for the foreseeable future, while the Devils get a solid top six forward locked up long-term and under the $8 million cap that they signed Jack Hughes. So personally, I think this is a win-win for both. Bratt's a solid NHL forward who I think is definitely worth that money, while the Devils definitely got themselves a good player in Bratt for the next couple of years. So definitely, good signing for both sides, and I think Bratt should definitely thrive with the New Jersey Devils. But these are all the signings we're going to get to today. Getting Bratt signed is a huge win for the Devils, and it gets rid of one of their big RFAs for this offseason. And then once again, Kopech could be a bomb 6-4 this year for Tampa. Murray, solid third stringer for Dallas. Jones could be a third pair defenseman for the Rangers. Boosie, probably a third stringer this year for Boston, but eventually could be a 1B at the NHL level. Solid signings in the entry-level contract for Pearson, Ottawa, and Wagner and Winnipeg, who could both be solid middle six players in the not-too-distant future. So definitely, I think all 7 signings were really good, and I really like all these signings for these teams. Next, we go over to the news update part of the video. There's not too much to get to here, but there was a couple of things. A trade that I forgot to mention last week between the Colorado Avalanche and the Dallas Stars. Now, it wasn't a really big trade, but the Dallas Stars traded the signing rights of pending UFA Frederick Olofsson to the Colorado Avalanche in exchange for future considerations. So basically, the Stars get nothing. They weren't really going to sign Olofsson anyway, so I don't think it's really too important for the Stars to get something for him, given the fact Olofsson was probably going to sign somewhere else in free agency anyway. For the Avalanche, a solid trade for them. Olofsson's been actually a pretty good winger over the past little while. He played in the SHL a couple of years ago, putting up 15 goals and 42 points in 49 games. Signed with the Stars. He was a good, solid player in his first pro season last year, as he had 5 goals and 14 points in 37 AHL games. Looked solid, was called up on a couple of occasions to play with the Stars, and had a goal and 4 points in 28 games. So definitely, Olofsson's turned out to be a really good bomb 6-4 at NHL level, or a really good top-end AHL forward. And he even got into a couple games later in the playoffs for the Stars when Jimmy Benn was suspended. So I definitely think that getting Olofsson was a really good job for the Avalanche for nothing. After acquiring him, Olofsson did sign a 1-year $775,000 deal. So personally, I think Olofsson could definitely be a solid bottom 6 forward for the Avalanche. Maybe he starts in the minors, which I think is also a possibility. But I think the Avalanche like him enough to give him a shot at the NHL level. I mean, they did trade for his rights, so obviously Colorado sees something there. So a 1-year league minimum deal is not too bad for the Avalanche, and signing a good player who could definitely be a solid bottom 6 forward in the NHL level, I think is really good. So once again, not a big signing, but the Avalanche acquire Olofsson signing rights and sign him to a 1-year league minimum deal from the Stars in exchange for future considerations. So once again, we're probably going to see some more big trades over the next couple of days and weeks leading up to the draft, free agency, and the days following. So we're probably going to have some more significant trades than just the minor league player for future considerations. But definitely, just one small trade to discuss here. And then a couple more buyouts. I know we talked about this on Saturday when the Vancouver Canucks bought out Oliver Ekman-Larsson, and that was a big buyout there. But we got a couple more buyouts, both with the Arizona Coyotes, as the Arizona Coyotes have bought Zach Kassian and Patrick Nemeth. Now, it's really interesting as we approach the draft and free agency. Last year, the Arizona Coyotes acquired Zach Kassian on draft day towards the end of the draft. They were able to move up 3 spots in that last year's first round draft, on top of getting a second and a third round pick for acquiring Kassian. On the first day of free agency, the Arizona Coyotes once again used their cap space to make a trade with the New York Rangers, trading low-end prospect Ty Emberson for taking on Patrick Nemeth's contract and a couple of second-round picks. It might have been a second and a third, but I think it was a couple of second-round picks. So, in the matter of a couple of days, the Arizona Coyotes used their cap space to take on 2 years of Patrick Nemeth, 2 years of Zach Kassian, move up 3 spots in a draft, and acquire 4 extra draft picks. So if the Arizona Coyotes were to do this again, I think they would definitely still do it. I mean, they got 4 picks in exchange for taking on bad contracts. So I definitely think they will continue to do this. But Nemeth was entering the final year of his deal at a $2.5 million cap hit. Kassian was entering the final year of his deal at a $3.2 million cap hit. So the buyout only is going to be on their books for the next 2 seasons. And with Arizona having a ton of cap flexibility right now, I don't think it's too worrisome for them. Kassian's buyout will give him a $1.6 million dead cap on the Arizona Coyotes books for this next season. And then they'll also have a $767,000 cap hit for next year. So once again, the Coyotes are not overly up against the cap, so it's not really a huge problem for them. As for the Patrick Nemeth, he only has a $167,000 dead cap penalty for the Coyotes this year. Meanwhile, he has a $1,670,000 dead cap hit on next year's salaries. So once again, it's not really a bad move by the Arizona Coyotes. It only counts to about $1.8 million in dead cap space for this year combined, and then $1.8 million in dead cap space for next year combined. So it's not really an overly big price to pay for the Coyotes. Those aren't bad buyouts. Plus, the Arizona Coyotes have a ton of cap space that they can use to do moves like this. So I don't think it's bad moves from Arizona's standpoint. It does give them 2 less roster spots for next year. So we'll get to more of that in a couple minutes. But definitely, Arizona's solid moves in my opinion. Kassian is a solid 4th-line forward, but was way overpaid at a $3.2 million cap hit. Nemeth is a solid 3rd-pair defenseman, but was way overpaid at a $2.5 million cap hit. So definitely, I think both of these guys should be able to find spots in free agency now they're free agents and bought out. Kassian, I could see him sign probably something around $1 million on like a 1 or 2 year deal to be a good solid 4th-line checking forward. Well, Nemeth I could probably see maybe signing a bit under $1 million to be a good 3rd-pair defenseman on a different team. So, in my eyes, I think this was the right move for the Arizona Coyotes. It frees up a little bit more cap space. I know they're trying to get to the cap floor, so they don't really need cap space. But it gives them a couple more extra roster spots to do some other things this offseason. And they only have to pay out the dead cap for the next 2 seasons. So, in my opinion, really good move for the Arizona Coyotes. And we have a couple more buyouts to discuss now. So, definitely, Kassian, Nemeth, they're solid bomb-end players, but they're not worth what they were making. So definitely, I think this is the right move for Arizona to buy those 2 out. And they now have 2 extra roster spots, and both Kassian and Nemeth are now free agents. So that's all the news that I want to talk about for today. Once again, solid small trade between Avs and the Stars, and solid buyouts by the Arizona Coyotes. Now, we'll get over to the trade rumor part of the video. So we'll start with the Winnipeg Jets, as there's been a lot of talk around Connor Hellebuyck over the past little while. Now, there's a lot of talk right now speculating that there's a couple of teams interested in Hellebuyck. But the thing I want to get to is the fact that on the Insider Trading video a couple of days ago, they stated that the New Jersey Devils have had some interest in Colin Hellebuyck and have explored the option of bringing him in. But, along with other teams, they're a bit wary of doing a sign-and-trade because of what Hellebuyck is asking. Now, we know that Hellebuyck is the most likely going to be traded at some point, maybe even between now and the draft. He's a star goaltender. He's a solid star in the NHL level. I don't think he's even put up a regular season where he hasn't had over a 900 save percentage, which is absolutely fantastic. And he's even been nominated for the Vezina Trophy this year. So, I mean, he's a solid NHL goaltender and will definitely improve whoever team's goalie position he goes to. So definitely, he's a solid NHL goalie, but according to recent reports, wants a long-term extension, probably looking at like 7 or 8 years, at Andrei Vasilevsky's money, which is $9.5 million. Now, that's a pretty steep price to pay. I know Hellebuyck is a solid goaltender. He's a really good player. He could definitely improve a team. But at $9.5 million for a guy who's just about to enter his 30s is not great. I mean, if they have to pay a starting goaltender until he's like 35, 36, $9.5 million, we've seen some of these contracts signed over the past couple of years where it didn't really age well. So I think there's a lot of teams worry about that, because I think a lot of teams know that if they sign Hellebuyck to a $9.5 million contract, there would definitely be maybe some regret signing him to a long-term deal of that money in the future. So I definitely do wonder if Hellebuyck maybe lowers his price a little bit than Andrei Vasilevsky's money to make it work a little bit better. But definitely, the Devils having interest I don't think is too surprising. We know that they've been looking for a solid NHL goaltender over the past couple of years. They did really well this year with Vanecek, Blackwood, and Schmid as their three main goalies this year. Once again, Blackwood's probably going to be gone as he's a pending RFA, so I don't expect him to be back. Schmid did really well in the playoffs, not overly well in the second round, but was a solid goaltender. And Vanecek definitely did really good this year for the Devils, so I do wonder if they maybe try and upgrade it on Vanecek, maybe even possibly move him out in a Hellebuyck trade. So I do wonder about the Devils possibly having interest. I wouldn't be too surprised if they do, but it just sounds like there's a ton of teams right now who do have interest in Hellebuyck. So I'm not going to say he's definitely going to move to the Devils, but it also seems that there's a lot of teams right now who are very wary of giving Hellebuyck an 7 to 8 year deal at a $9.5 million cap it, given his age and the fact that he could regress in a couple of years and that contract could look quite bad. So I definitely do wonder if there's a team out there who's willing to pay him that, or if he'll have to lower his asking price in order to sign somewhere, or maybe he just gets moved as a rental. So definitely interesting to see, but it sounds like some teams are wary of paying Hellebuyck a $9.5 million deal in a sign and trade. So definitely going to be interesting to see. Then we got the Buffalo Sabres. We got a couple of notes there. First was another Olofsson. I know we talked about Frederick Olofsson just a little while ago in the small trade between the Avs and the Stars. But Victor Olofsson, who's been with the Buffalo Sabres for the past couple of seasons, is currently drawing a lot of interest on the trade market. There's a couple of teams there who's looking for top six wingers who are looking to bring in Olofsson as a solid goal scorer. Olofsson, he's definitely a solid goal scorer, more of a power play operation player. He can definitely play on like the second or first power play unit. He's a solid middle six goal scorer who can definitely, shown over the past couple of years, he can put up some goals. He's got one more year left on his contract at a $4.75 million cap hit, so maybe the Sabres will change some salary to make it a little bit easier on another acquiring team. But Olofsson's starting to get a little bit boxed out of the Buffalo lineup with some of those younger guys like a Peterka or a Quinn or a Kulich coming into the lineup. He's definitely been boxed out, so I definitely think that with him entering the final year of his contract, the Sabres would definitely be willing to move him. There's definitely been some interest from teams, who need top six help, like the Colorado Avalanche, maybe the Dallas Stars, Edmonton Oilers, New York Islanders, Carolina Hurricanes. Some of those teams would be teams I'll be watching out for in an Olofsson trade. Definitely, he's a good third line forward who can help extremely well in the power play and is a really good goal scorer who could definitely help with the depth scoring. So definitely, I would think a lot of teams would have interest in Olofsson, and I think a trade at some point would happen this offseason. Meanwhile, for Buffalo, they're trying to find a top four defenseman who can work with their young core. Now, they have a solid young core group with guys like Dahlin, Power, and Samuelsson. So they have three solid top four defensemen. But it does seem that they could use one good, solid veteran top four defenseman. Now, it sounds like they're in on a ton of defensemen. They've been linked to a guy like Brett Pesce. They've been linked to a guy like Noah Hannafin. Some solid players who could be trade chips at some point this year. So definitely, I think Buffalo's looking at a lot of defenders right now, and would not be surprising to me if they were to move a couple of pieces to bring in a solid top four defenseman. We know that they have a ton of forward prospects. They have Kulich, they have Rosen, they have Östlund in the minors right now, who haven't even made the NHL roster. And then they have guys like Quinn and Peterka and Cozens and Thompson and Tuck in their top six. And they also have a couple of other young guys. So they definitely have a solid NHL roster right now. So I would not be surprised if they maybe use one of their prospects. Plus, they have a couple of good picks, too, so maybe they use a prospect and a pick to acquire a solid defenseman like a Noah Hannafin or a Brett Pesce. So it would not surprise me at all if they did that, but definitely sounds like Buffalo is checking in on a lot of defenders. And it would not be as shocking if the Sabres were to acquire a top four defenseman who could definitely be improving that top four with guys like Dahlin, Power, and Samuelsson. So definitely keep an eye out there, as I do think there's a strong possibility that the Sabres try and acquire defensemen, whether it be on the left side or the right side, a solid top four veteran who could really work well with guys like Darlene Power and Samuelson. And lastly, here with the Arizona Coyotes. There have been a couple of reports, one from Frank Saravalli and one from Chris Johnston on the TSN Insider Trading video a couple days ago, stating that the Arizona Coyotes could be going in and changing directions. Now, Frank Saravalli said that he expects that the Arizona Coyotes are going to try and start getting more competitive, so they're not looking to take on bad contracts like they have been over the past couple of years, and they're also not willing at this moment to trade Schmalz or Krause or Keller. So they're trying to build around their core. As for what Chris Johnston said on the TSN Insider Trading video, he said the Arizona Coyotes could look to move some of their draft capital. He says they're not probably looking to move either the 6th or 12th pick in this year's first round draft, which happens next week. But they do have 9 second round picks plus 9 third round picks over the next 3 years. So they could use some of that draft capital to take on some players who they think could help their team long term. So this definitely is another change of direction for the Arizona Coyotes. Up to this point over the past couple of years, they've been a solid rebuilding team, taking on bad contracts, gaining draft capital, drafting prospects as many as they can, as many solid players as they can, but it seems like they now want to try and become a little more competitive. I think they definitely surprised some people when they did some pretty good things this year. They weren't as bad as a lot of teams expected, and even though they still were 6th lowest in the NHL, they were still a solid NHL team. So I definitely think that they did surprise a couple of people, but I definitely think like the rebuild could be ending in the not too distant future. Arizona, I would not expect them to be big game hunting, so I wouldn't expect them to go out and acquire like a top end free agent and sign into lots of money. I also wouldn't expect them to try and move as much draft capital as they can to get a big piece. But I've also seen some reports that they would be somewhere along the lines of getting some players who are sort of boxed out of their role due to cap reasons of other teams and trading some of their draft picks to get them. So what I would probably think that would be most likely a comparison would be the Seattle Kraken last year with the Columbus Blue Jackets. After signing Johnny Gaudreau, Oliver Bjorkstrand was boxed out of the Jackets' top 6. The Jackets thought that they couldn't really use him in the top 6 anymore now that they have Gaudreau. He was also making over $5 million, which was really tight against the cap for the Jackets. They needed to clear some money, so they traded Bjorkstrand to the Kraken for a 3rd and a 4th round pick. And Bjorkstrand's been a mainstay in the Seattle top 6 ever since. He helped them in the playoffs, got 2 goals in Game 7 of the first round series against the Avalanche, and has been solid ever since the Seattle Kraken acquired him and still signed for the next couple of years. So this is sort of the type of moves I could see Arizona making, moving a 2nd or a 3rd round pick to a team to acquire a guy who's not a bad player, who's actually quite a good player, but sort of boxed out cap-wise of that team's future. So sort of like the Bjorkstrand trade from last year, I could see the Arizona Coyotes try and pull multiple deals. Definitely, it sounds like they're trying to improve this team to get better, and they're sort of done with the rebuild. And at this point, they're going to try and transition from being more of a rebuilding team to building a better team who can definitely compete a little bit more. But once again, I relay my fact that I've been relaying ever since the Tampa vote falls through for the Arizona Coyotes. If the Arizona Coyotes don't have a plan in place by free agency, they're not going to be able to sign good, solid NHL players to their team to play with the Arizona Coyotes, because there's no plan in place. They know they're going to play Mullet Arena next year. That much is guaranteed. But beyond that, no one knows what's going to happen with Arizona. Are they going to stay in Arizona? Are they going to go to another place? There's a lot of talk around the Stanley Cup Final Game 1 that Arizona is going to have to decide on their future in the not-too-distant future. So I would definitely think that there has to be some sort of announcement on the Arizona Coyotes around the free agency at least, so they can sign some players in free agency. Because once again, I don't think many players will want to go to Arizona if they have one more year at Mullet Arena and then they don't know what their future is. I definitely think that they're going to have some sort of a plan in place to bring in some free agents, but definitely I think this is a solid move by Arizona to try and come out of their rebuild. They're definitely been a solid NHL team over the past couple of years. They're a good young team who I think in time could definitely be a good team who can challenge for a spot. They're probably going to have some good young players next year, and over the next couple of years, some of their top young prospects are going to come into the NHL. But I think for the next couple of years, they could get some solid players like the Kraken did with Bjorkstrand, where they really fleeced the Jackets and were able to make really good off the tight cap situation the Jackets were with. So I definitely think that was the sort of move that Arizona could do. And it doesn't sound like they're going to be trying to take on extremely bad contracts anymore. And it looks like they're going to be trying to improve this team to be competitive for the next couple of years. So definitely, love to hear what you think now in the comments. Is there a team out there who you think could pay Hellebuyck $9.5 million on an average annual value? And if so, what sort of team do you think will be willing to pay for him if the Jets were to do a sign-in trade instead of just moving Hellebuyck as a rental? Does Victor Olofsson get moved by the Sabres? If so, which team do you think he goes to? And what sort of defender do you think the Sabres would be most interested in trying to acquire? And on top of those two things, do you think Arizona should be trying to acquire players right now? Or do you think they should continue to try and gain draft capital with their rebuild and try and continue to add bad contracts? And if the Arizona Coyotes should go and add some more players to their team who can help them for now, what sort of players do you think they could be targeting this offseason? Definitely let me know down in the comments. But definitely, it sounds like there's going to be a lot of things over the next couple of days and couple of weeks leading up to the draft and free agency and then beyond. It sounds like there's a lot of talks right now surrounding teams like Arizona, like Winnipeg. Calgary's been mentioned in trade talks. Philadelphia's been mentioned. Boston's been mentioned. So there's a ton of rumors right now surrounding the NHL. And it does sound like in the next day or two, we could be getting some more significant NHL trades. So definitely, if something happens that's really significant, I might do a small video tomorrow. Other than that, I'll probably do my next video on Saturday. And remember, don't forget to tune in on Wednesday, June 28th, as I'll be doing my live draft coverage, giving my live opinion of the draft on June 28th at 4 o'clock Pacific time and 7 o'clock Eastern time. So don't forget to tune into that. But definitely, I'd love to hear what you think down in the comments about all that was discussed today. And that's all I'm going to talk about for this video. So definitely, remember to leave a like in this video. And if you really liked it, remember to subscribe. I also do a blog talking about news, rumors, off-season plans, trades. So definitely touch on all of that too. If there's a significant trade, I might also post on that. So definitely check that out. I'll leave a link down in the description below. And I can't wait to see you guys all for the next video. See you guys soon.